Imagine that you're the principal of a junior high school. Now imagine that as a principal, you also receive a report card depending on how well your school is doing. And part of that report card that they grade you on is what percentage of your students pass all their classes. And so there's a number of things that count against you or for you, but this is one of them. Now imagine that it's the end of the first quarter, you're looking over the school's grades, and you have a teacher that's failing over 90% of her students. And so when you go to approach that situation, how do you talk to that teacher without letting bias creep in? How do you talk to that teacher without letting pressure from the outside creep in? How do you listen to that teacher's rationale objectively as you can? And so these are some of the issues we have when we're talking about accountability. And accountability comes from the bigger government. It also comes from local stakeholders as well, whether that be parents, whether that be the students themselves, whether it be politicians or whoever. And so while we understand that accountability should be a positive thing, it can go both ways. And so it really depends on how a school is set up. But overall, this is what I would say. I would say that I've seen the ugly side of it. And I've seen how accountability can really lead to tremendous losses for the student. So if we stay on that example, and this teacher, maybe after you talk to them, maybe that teacher is pretty strict, and maybe that teacher has high expectations. And so the students understand those expectations and they just aren't meeting them. Or the teacher really believes in preparing the students for the next level and really giving them a rigorous class so that they learn. Or maybe that teacher just isn't good at doing their job. How do we determine that? Either way, as the principal, as somebody that's interested in the results, you might be very tempted to try to sway that teacher. And now you compromise the way the teacher wants to teach. You compromise the integrity and the rigor of the class. And so let's just say it's not one teacher. Let's say you got a certain grade level. All the 7th grade teachers are failing their students at a higher rate. Or let's just say it's a subject. All the math teachers are failing their students at a higher rate. How do you then address that problem? And I've seen where it goes to an ugly path. For example, again, it might not be the pass-fail rate, but it might be the school's average GPA. It might be a number of different things that the school is being graded on. And so as a result, you can't directly tell a teacher to go easy on a student or a class. But as a result, there are conversations where that point comes across. And so it could look a number of ways, even to the point I've been in situations where the leadership decided that there had to be rationale turned in by a teacher if they were to fail a student. And so you can't give a student an F until you turn in a rationale of why you're failing the student and what you tried to do to help the student. And so now you shift the blame, so to speak, to the teacher. And not to say that the teacher has no fault, but it's not an either or. It's not a 0 or 100. It's a relationship between the teacher and the student to make learning. And so while in the past you could say it's 100% on the student, hey, you failed, it's your fault. The teacher, they're not the problem. We can say that that's not right, but it's also not right to tell a teacher that, hey, you need to explain why this student failed. Otherwise, you can't fail them. You got to give them a D. And we know it's not for the benefit of the student. It's for the benefit of the school to look accountable. And so we get into this cycle of doing things just to do it, to look good. And we don't do it with any actual fidelity. We don't do it with any actual intention to benefit the student. We're just doing it to benefit ourselves. And students understand that. And as much as people don't give students credit, they do understand and they pick up on things. And so if you're going to a school, whether it's the physical presence of the school, you got a school that's not well kept, they're going through metal detectors, they got police in the school, the school doesn't take care of the building, the students aren't going to take care of the building. You got students sitting in class, and we'll talk a little bit this in a different topic with behavior, but they're sitting in class, they might not be behaving, but you got books that are 40 years old. You got books that are torn apart, or maybe you only got 3 copies for the whole entire class. The students are it turns into a self-fulfilling prophecy. The students are going to see how you value them, and they're going to act accordingly. And so same thing with the rigors of the class. If they know if it's a joke, they know if the school is a joke. And so when students get into that atmosphere where you aren't promoting rigor, you aren't showing them that you're taking school serious, you're giving so many loopholes, everything falls apart. And I've been there. And it's only going to get worse as students have more information or access to information. But students know that. And so, again, we get back to this idea of, especially on the K-12 side, we have the government that mandates a lot of things. There's a lot of standardized testing. There's a lot of benchmarks that need to be met. There's a lot of things that are handed down to schools, and they're just told to figure it out. And it's not to say that it's fair to the leadership or anything. That's a bigger issue, but it happens. And so schools can be responsible for a number of things, and it depends. I've been in systems where money is tied to the property value of the surrounding area. Obviously, more money and resources are going to go to people who already have more money and resources, and thus keeping the cycle going. I've been in systems in districts where money is tied to performance. And so schools that have higher GPAs, better test scores, they get more money. And then, of course, the students that are more likely to perform better are students that are already with resources. And that keeps the cycle going. And so there's a number of ways it can look, but whatever it is, these the people that are in the schools, the leadership, they have to respond to this accountability. And it's justifiable to a point, because as people, we buy something, we pay for a service or a product, and we expect that it does what you told me to. And if it doesn't, you need to be accountable. You need to show me that you're working towards a solution, or you need to, give me my money back. And so as education turns more into a product, that's what people are looking for. And it's been that way on the K-12 system. The people are asking about education and where money is going from the government and what are the results. The government is asking, we've given you money, where are the results? Everybody's has their hand in the K-12 system to say you need to produce results. And everybody is under pressure to produce results, And so it's a very interesting thing when politics, for lack of a better word, get into it. Because if you think about your traditional scientific method, you think about traditional research, a lot of times you might have a hypothesis. You might say, okay, we created this program, this online program, and we think it's going to do XYZ for students because of XYZ. And then your natural progress is to say, all right, let's get these students in here. Let's try it. Let's test it out. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, it's like, okay, well, that's wrong. Let's go back to the drawing board and fix it. But that's not how it happens when politics get into it. You can do that in small research, but in real life consequences, it doesn't work that way. So when the district buys a product or the school buys a product, it isn't so much a, do you want to do this? Can you figure out a way to do this? It's, you're going to do it. And then it's not so much of a way of, let's see what the results are and move on if it doesn't work. It's like, no, let's justify our decision by these results. And that's when people start playing with numbers. That's when people might frankly do some illegal things. And that's when things are forced upon students that might not be right. And so we've seen that a number of things. Advanced placement has its place, and I feel comfortable with it. But then there's other designations like a international baccalaureate, the IB program, which has run rampant across the U.S. And it's a credential distinction that schools want to work. And so they bring it in, they pay these people to implement it, and they want it to work. And so some of these programs are better though, because they have more accountability outside of the school. So you, like the IB body, the organization, they're looking at the test and they're grading it, AP as well. So it's not like, hey, give the test to the school and let the school grade it, because then the school's definitely going to cheat. So there's a little bit of accountability there. But overall, passing those classes, having high GPAs, do you think it's not in the teacher's best interest to make sure that the students look good so that they're, whoever, I forgot the title, but whoever's over their subject is happy with it? Do you think it's not in the lead teacher's best interest to make it look good so that the assistant principal's happy with it? And do you think it's not in the assistant principal's best interest to make it look good so the principal's happy and the principal wants to do it so the powers that be are happy? That all goes into it. So where you put your resources, where you put your time, where you put your effort, it all goes into what's being tracked for accountability. And in that system, you just lose the integrity of the actual education. Not everybody, obviously. There's places that have the balance, the mindset, and the resources, frankly, to do it. And it's typically schools with more resources because they then have the tools to provide a better holistic education. But when you're a school that needs the resources, when you're a school that's barely holding on, then it's going to be a lot more tempting for you and people whose job is on the line to make things look good. And that's when cutting corners happens. And so there's a real danger in accountability. Although we want it as people, and we should have access to information. We should know what's happening in our schools that we're paying for. We should know where the taxpayers' dollars are going to. But there needs to be better conversation. I can tell you from the front lines, in a lot of these places, there is not much conversation. It's politics. As I said earlier, you're going to implement this, just figure out how to make it work. And there's not a lot of conversation of how we should go about it. If this is right for our school, for our students, what's a way we can roll this out? How do we get people on board? It's just do it. And then things fall apart, and it's just a long process of putting band-aids on a broken system to make it limp along and look good enough until the next system comes. And that's sadly the truth for a lot of places. And with that, the only real losers in this are the students. And so I talk about this subject, and I talk about education in general with the idea of the skeptic, the idea of the person that's sitting there saying, why should we have our students, or our children really, why should our children have to go to school until this age? Why should my child have to get a degree for this type of job? Why should I have to pay this amount of money for my student to be educated? What is the benefit of it? And so we started with talking about the content in class at a real core level of what education should look like. But now we're getting to a real realistic level of some of the issues that take away from what it could look like. And one of those things is this idea of chasing this, not even prestige. Sometimes it is, but it's really just chasing the quota. And you want to look at whatever's best. A quick example, and this will definitely be another topic, but a quick example, a lot of the work I did was in post-secondary, getting students ready for college or whatever happens after they graduate. And part of our evaluation, obviously, is college enrollment. And so when you look at everything that a student can do, whether it's going to a 4-year college or 2-year college, getting a job, just going into the workforce, going to a trade school, going to the military, whatever. When you look at all that, the one that is being pushed and valued at the time was 4-year college enrollment and 2-year college, but for the most part, 4-year college enrollment. And so as a grade, we got more points for people that enrolled in college than we got points for people doing anything else. And so again, without it being directly said, the message comes across that we want to push students to go to college. And I personally believe college is for everyone. That's another subject. But I do understand there's a time and place, and there's a mindset that not every student is ready to do it right away. And so sometimes you will have students that either financially or emotionally just weren't ready to do college, but they were being pushed to it because that's what was rewarded. And so you obviously think like anything else, like football, like basketball, you get 3 points from shooting it here, you get 2 points from anywhere else. Okay, naturally, we want to start shooting from there so we can get more points. Football, touchdowns cost or are worth more than field goals. So naturally, we want to score in the end zone instead of kick a field goal. And that's all it really is human nature to then obviously understand what that target is. And so that's just one example, but there's a lot of things. And I mean, it just depends on where your district or their leadership is looking at. Some areas, they really focus heavy on ACT scores, and you're going to see a lot of resources put into those ACT scores, as far as ACT prep, mandatory prep, after school prep, all that type of stuff. You got a lot of charter schools that like to give the ACT to every student every year, and so that they're exposed to it by the time they get to juniors. And then you can say, look, our average ACT score as a school is a 28 out of 36. And on paper, it all sounds good. You're accountable. You're doing what we think you should. But we never look deeper into those numbers to see that that means anything. So GPAs as a predictor of success or even education. Test scores as a predictor of success or education. They're not there. They're absolutely not there. And so we're so busy chasing the numbers that we never, ever get to the deeper questions of how to make our education better for a lot of schools. That's not everywhere. Now, on the opposite end, because I'm always going to connect these two, the higher education side, college side, that's where I'm at now. And you see a very, very different world where K12 has been through so much accountability that it's on one end of the spectrum. They know how to assess, they know how to test, they know how to get things done because they've always been asked to do things by the government. But they've done it to a point of a fault where you sacrifice the education. College, on the other hand, has never been asked to do much. There's obviously certain things that you have to do financial aid wise, definitely public institutions. But by and large, the state government does not give a lot of money compared to what they used to public institutions. And so the power, you already had a situation where colleges just kind of operated on their own throughout the historical time of it. a lot of law bodies just said, hey, they know better. We don't know what's going on with college students. Y'all take care of it. And they just let colleges do what they want. And that's starting to change, definitely in the courtroom. But for the most part, legislation, they don't make colleges do a whole bunch of things. Compared to K through 12 is nothing. And so obviously having to live your existence with no, accountability, raising students through that system, students becoming future professionals, future professors, and just going cycle after cycle. We're sitting at a point where a lot of people don't know how to really assess and be truly accountable. And I found that as an interesting thing, as being somebody from the high school side, where I see just how much we have to do. And then get into the college side, and they don't do much. And so when you start talking about, well, what are ways we can start assessing, we can start being accountable and figuring out if what we do is actually working, it's hard for a lot of people to think of answers. And so that's interesting to me. But what we have seen and what we will see is a shift, because as I said, everybody's becoming consumers. Everybody's becoming into that mindset that education is a product. And so people shop for colleges. They don't pick a college or look at college, they shop. And the more and more we get to that point where there's options of online, there's options of this, people have to sell and they got to pitch their school to the students and more so to the parents. And when that happens and people are picking your school and they're paying you this money, you got to start answering questions. Before you didn't. Before it was just what they called a black box. You just go to college and everything will be cool. Now people want questions. They want answers. They got questions. They want to see what's actually happening. And so a lot of programs that just got to spend money, a lot of places that just had budgets and just got to do the same thing every year, they now have to start really justifying what's happening. Now, that's going to be on the other end of the spectrum, because it's just how humans are. And it's just the nature of the business, because now everything's becoming business-like. So you got education, or you got K through 12, where so much accountability that they sacrifice education. And then you got higher ed, where there was so little accountability that they sacrifice the integrity of their spending. And so prices ballooned, budgets ballooned, and now it's getting ready to pop. And with the corona and everything and online, I'll talk about that another time. But basically what I'm saying is that that's changing faster than it already was. Places where, because we got less students graduating, we got less people going to college, places already started to start asking questions and looking at budgets and start trying to be more responsible. This, with the whole shutdown, is going to make it 50 times worse. People that thought that they could just get away with the same things, they're going to have to start answering questions. They're going to have to start showing proof. And we're going to have to start having real conversations about how to evaluate. And again, I don't think the government's ever going to be in the business of telling colleges what to do like they do high schools. But what's going to happen is that since they have nobody pushing them to do it, you're going to see some schools have a much better advantage if they understand how to be accountable and assess what they're actually doing. And there's going to be a lot of schools that don't know how to do it. And there's going to be very hard for them to show proof to people, stakeholders, potential customers, potential students, whoever. It's going to be hard for them to show proof that they're actually producing what they say they produce. And so it will be an interesting shift, and it's going to happen a lot quicker because of the whole quarantine situation. So accountability looks different on both of those sides. And again, I think you meet it in the middle, and accountability is a good thing. We want people to be responsible. We want people to do the things they said. We want people to be accountable with the money and the resources you give them. But there's a lot of systems in place. There's a lot of conversations that aren't being had that cause well-intentioned people, for the most part, to really fall into this trap of sacrificing the student's experience, whether that's the rigor of the education on the high school and secondary level, where you got teachers just being strong-armed into being lenient with their grades, not trying to fail kids. Don't even get me started on summer school. Some people's summer schools and accelerant programs are absolute joke. And I'm trying to have a bigger conversation here, but I could get into some very specific times and things that I've seen that would just shock you, and just, it's upsetting. I mean, just to give you a quick one with the summer thing, because it's just on my mind. So we're talking about, again, student fails despite your best efforts. They fail and they're in summer school. Now, we don't want these students to be a grade back. So you start thinking about No Child Left Behind. And we don't want them to be a grade back. We want to make it as possible, not as possible, as feasible as possible for the student to go to the summer and get back on track. I met students, sophomores, juniors in high school, that literally can't read, like cannot read at an 8th grade level, or can't do addition and subtraction. And it's just like, you talk to them and it's like, what happened? Thought you learned this in this grade. I failed that grade, went to summer school. Okay, well, you still on track. Man, summer school wasn't nothing. They just gave us like a piece of paper. It didn't matter what we wrote. They gave us an A. They just passed us. And that's what we have going on rampant in America, because it's not about educating. It's not about the experience of the students. It's about completing things. And that becomes a big problem. And then you got the other side with higher education, no accountability, people getting money, people doing programs that in theory sounds great. You got people spending $10,000 on events and programs where only 10 people show up, and they continue to let them do these programs year after year. Meanwhile, students are paying thousands upon thousands of dollars in fees to have this programming and these resources that aren't even effective or attractive to them. And so the money keeps rising as you try to compete with other schools. The price keeps rising, and we are where we are right now. That bubble is about to burst with the whole Corona thing. People are not going for that anymore. And so that's the two ugly sides of accountability. And I could go on a longer time for this, but I'll end it there. Definitely go to the comment section. Would like to engage this conversation. If it's something that you are interested in, or you know other people are interested in, definitely share it around. I think it's a bigger conversation. I want to continue talking about this in the series. So share it around, get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe, and thank you for listening.